made contact.
Oh dear.
So the first season of The Acolyte wrapped up earlier this week, and I feel like this is one of the most controversial pieces of media I've ever consumed. You've got people on both ends of the spectrum who are very vocal about how they feel about this show. But now that the season's wrapped up, I think now is a good time for me to really get out all of these thoughts that I've had throughout the season. And without beating around the bush any, I'm just gonna go out and say, I really enjoyed it. I feel pretty confident when I say that this is probably the most overhated thing that I've ever watched. All of this outrage and, oh, it sucks because of this, oh, it's terrible because of this, I've just kind of rolled my eyes for however long this show's been airing. 2 months? I've just been rolling my eyes for 2 months. And before we get too far into this video, I just want to point out that this is not going to be a very nice video to watch if you're a big hater of The Acolyte. A lot of the people that I've interacted with and have seen have been very disrespectful to anyone who claims to like this show, to people who worked on the show, including the cast, and that's just not something that I can respect. So I'm not gonna take the high road in this instance. I'm just gonna be mean back. I guess I should have known that we were in for a rough 2 months of Star Wars whenever the pre-show review bombing started, and all the people who have done it and have supported it claim that the show is just bad, that it's just really a 1-star show. Well, guess what? It was at what, like in the teens percentage-wise for audience score before the first episode ever came out. So it's really just been disappointing hearing people who do the review bombing and support the review bombing saying that the show really is just 1 star. If it's not out yet and you're already giving it a 1 star, how are you justifying that? Like, I know you're just there to hate it, and that's very, you know, transparent to everybody else, but the fact that you're also gonna try to pretend like that's not what's happening is just sad. And now I know a lot of this started from the director and different cast members saying things in different interviews, but honestly, there was nothing that was said that justifies review bombing in this instance. Like, they're entitled to their own opinions on different things, just like you are with yours. And as much as I don't like to pull this card, a lot of the pre-show review bombing and a lot of the hate that this show got before it ever came out, a good chunk of it is just thinly veiled racism and homophobia. It's no secret that there's a large chunk of people who are upset at the increased diversity in this show in terms of race and the fact that there were lesbians in this show. And it's really just disappointing. It's a bad look that you're giving us as Star Wars fans.
Isn't it toxic?
And I know also in the pre-show interviews, there was an interview with the actor who plays Yord when he said that Anakin blew up the Death Star, and people were just up in arms about it because how could he not know it was Luke who blew up the Death Star? How could he not remember that? Guess what? Not everyone is the same level of Star Wars fan. And also, an actor doesn't need to be well-versed in the lore to play a character well. They don't need to do that. Do you think everyone who joins Marvel knows everything about Marvel? Do you think anyone who joins DC knows everything about DC? They don't. Spoiler alert, they don't. There are people for that. That's what the director's there for. That's what the writers are there for. That's what Filoni and Favreau are there for. Even Kathleen Kennedy, as much as people dislike Kathleen Kennedy, that's what she's there for. Whether an actor is a super fan of the franchise that they're entering or hasn't seen an ounce of it, that does not dictate how they can play a character and if they can play a character well. Since I've been watching this show weekly, and it's been 2 months now, I've had to keep a little list of things that I wanted to talk about because a lot has happened, both outside of the show with people just complaining about things and with things that have happened actually inside the show. So I'm just gonna go chronologically what I wrote down. That's what I'm gonna talk about. So I guess keeping that in mind, let's talk about some of the supposed canon breaks that this show does. And by canon breaks, I mean nothing was really broken in canon. And by nothing was really broken in canon, I mean literally nothing. I know a big thing that people were really upset about earlier in the season was that they retconned Coyote-Mundy's age. Well, unfortunately for those people, his age was not retconned. The only thing that established his age was a 2013 trading card and the 1999 Phantom Menace Insider's Guide CD-ROM. This was before Attack of the Clones. This same CD-ROM that listed Coyote-Mundy's age also listed his lightsaber color as purple, and Mace Windu's lightsaber color as blue. This is not canon, people. And even if it wasn't non-canon by Disney standards, it's still non-canon by George Lucas standards. he changed Coyote-Mundi's character between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. So there really is no canon break there. George Lucas changed it. And I know people always want to say, Disney canon doesn't matter. It's just what George did. Well, guess what? George did this. So what's the complaint? And during the time of the whole Coyote-Mundi debacle, you also had people sending death threats to Wikipedia editors, which is absolutely insane. This is why, as a Star Wars fan, who's been a Star Wars fan since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I will call myself a Star Wars fan, but it's just embarrassing to say I'm part of the Star Wars fandom, because other people in the fandom are absolutely insane. They just spout drivel and do stupid things. And I remember people trying to defend it too, like, that never happened. Well, guess what? You're really gonna sit up there and try to act like out of the millions of Star Wars fans, there's not some insane ones who would do exactly that. Come on now, you're kidding yourself. I remember when people were complaining that there were witches in Star Wars and that Force magic was in Star Wars, and why would Star Wars make a show about witches? Guess what? Witches in Star Wars is not a new concept. Force magic is not a new concept. And when it was in Clone Wars, and when it was in Rebels, and when it was in Ahsoka, it wasn't a problem. But now all of a sudden it is. Now all of a sudden it breaks canon. All of a sudden now, why is it here? Guess what? What are you talking about? Why are you being wish-washy? So I guess real quick, let's talk about the biggest controversy that ever came out of this show, and that was Osha and May being made with the Force. Because apparently Anakin was the first and only to ever be made with the Force, and that can't happen, it breaks canon, blah blah blah. Guess what? That's just misinformation. Because not only was that never established, but it didn't even happen in the same way. The witches created May and Osha. They used the power of the Virgins, and through the Force they created life. Two people, but they're actually one. And Anakin was created by the Force itself. Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious's grand experiment was to create life through the Force. The Force rejected this and instead, on its own, created Anakin to eventually bring balance to the Force. So just so there's no confusion, the witches used the Force to create May and Osha. The Force itself created Anakin. So, not the same thing, if that wasn't obvious. Because of the finale of The Acolyte, we know that Darth Plagueis was on the same world as Camille, or the Stranger, whatever you want to call him. And we know that Camille was on Brendok listening to Sol explain how the witches used the Virgins to create May and Osha. And with Osha now joining Camille and going to train with him, this could be the connection to where Darth Plagueis is inspired or gets the idea to do his grand experiment to create life of his own later with Palpatine. Now I know that last part is speculation, but I'm not the only person to have speculated this. And I know that there's a large chunk of people who are saying that this cheapens the wisdom and intelligence of Darth Plagueis. But to those people I ask this, do you think that Palpatine just learned everything on his own too? Do you think he didn't learn a lot from Darth Plagueis, his master? Do you think that he didn't, in fact, learn a lot of the dark magic power he has from Mother Talzin? Do we think that Yoda's just wise and he never learned from anybody? Come on now, y'all are being ridiculous. Every wise and intelligent person in both Star Wars and in the real world has learned from someone else. So to act like that cheapens wisdom or intelligence is just tomfoolery. While we're still talking about things that people complained about, let's talk about May saying a Jedi only pulls their weapon to kill. Guess what? May is very deluded. May is a part of the dark side. Even if she's not a Sith, she's an Acolyte or an Acolyte in training. And she has a very skewed and biased view of the Jedi and how they are in her head. And that's explained later in the show. We see that Sol did kill Mother Anastasia, and May was there. She saw that. And that definitely influenced her, especially seeing that at the age that she did, growing up with that. Absolutely, that's how she got to that point, and that's why she believes where she believes. And you know, if people would have just waited and saw what was coming next and saw that flashback, then we would have understood why she had that point of view. And this complaint would have never needed to happen. And I think that just speaks volumes, that people would rather just jump out and complain that they don't understand something when we're on episode 1. Like, yeah, you don't understand anything yet. Why don't you just watch and understand later? That's how shows work. That's how watching things and understanding things and learning things work. Another complaint that people had about May was after she learns that Osha's still alive in episode 2, we have the flashback in episode 3, and then in episode 4, when we pick back up with where May is now, she switches sides, seemingly. And it's not really that she's even switching sides. She's not saying that, oh, I'm just kidding, the Jedi are good. She's just abandoning her commitment to follow the dark side. And that's completely understandable, because as Kamir later tells Osha, May was never really in it to be a Sith. She just wanted revenge and nothing more. And so learning that your sister is alive, your twin sister, if you even want to call them twins at this point, because it's all very confusing what they actually are. But people complaining that she just flips sides on a whim, that's a ridiculous thing to say. Because she believed the person she was closest to, her sister, was dead for 16 years, either killed by the Jedi, and that's why, in part, why she wanted revenge, or worse, that she killed her on accident, which is a whole nother level of, trauma and all that. But to learn that you have family when you thought they were all dead, of course that changes everything. She was never gonna be a Sith. She just wanted revenge. And even if she wanted to join the dark side, like, she wasn't gonna be a Sith. Like, she would have been an Acolyte or something like that, an assassin, but I mean, that makes total sense to me. I don't know why that doesn't make sense to other people. To those people, I would say, have you never seen a video or something of an orphan who was adopted finally meet in their later life their biological mom or dad? Like, that changes you, for better or worse, whether you're pissed off at them and you want nothing to do with them, or if you welcome them with open arms and just are so happy that you have your biological parent in your life. For better or for worse, it has a big impact. After the big fight in episode 5, I saw a couple people saying that Kamir, or the stranger, was too powerful. And to them I would ask, why exactly? Sol is the only master that's confirmed to be there. Everybody else is a knight or a Padawan. And he makes pretty quick work of some of them, but even Jeki and Yord, they take a while. They put up a good fight. And sure, he gets the best of them in the end. But, I mean, we're talking about a Sith here. How can we sit here and say he's too powerful when Ventress goes toe-to-toe with Obi-Wan and Anakin multiple times in the Clone Wars and gets the best of Luminara during the Clone Wars? And Ventress is at that point probably a lesser warrior than Kamir is in this show. So how are we saying he's too powerful? We've also got Savage Opress in the Clone Wars, who's down on the totem pole quite a bit in terms of the Sith of his time. He's not even really a Sith at all. He's more of like an Acolyte or an assassin or whatever you want to call him, because Maul's not the big Sith Lord either. But Savage Opress gets the best of and kills a Jedi Master in Adigalia. We're not saying he's too powerful, so where's the line? What's the standard for what's too powerful? Or is this just something we're saying just to say? These past couple months have been very difficult as a Star Wars fan because a lot of the fandom has just gone off the deep end. And so hearing anything about the Acolyte has usually been negative or accompanied by a negative or just a bunch of negative in the comment section of something that is reasonable. So, it's just been a tough time. And probably the worst part for me is that all of the hatred that this show has received has been, for the most part, largely unjustified. A lot of the canon breaks that have received hate weren't canon breaks, and a lot of the other things have just been, hate just for the sake of hate. And some of these people that I know personally are just hating it just to hate won't admit that. They'll hide behind these excuses of canon breaks, they'll hide behind this and that, they'll give non-answers and, gibberish, but they won't just admit that they're hating it just to hate it. For some reason, they've been acting like it's a battle between people who hate this show and people who like it, acting like people who like it are just insane, and if you're allowed to like it, I'm allowed to hate it. Well, guess what? People who like it aren't constantly putting you down for hating it. You're putting people down who like it. Like, we're not the same. Now that I've gotten out of the way everything I wanted to talk about in terms of the negative, people's complaints about this show, and all the controversy that surrounded it, I want to talk about some things that I really liked about this show. The first one being, I really love the choreography in this show. I think this is the best choreography we've ever had in a live-action Star Wars show. I don't think there should be any, debate about that. Nothing really comes close, to be honest. And not only that, The fight that we had in episode 5 of this show, the big one with Khmer and all the Jedi, that's the best choreography we've had in Star Wars, period, since Ahsoka versus Maul. And it might even be better than that. I'm just, doing Ahsoka versus Maul in Clone Wars, the service of, letting it retain that spot. I will also say, in live action, this is my favorite choreography. I think this is the best choreography we've gotten in a Star Wars project, live action, since Revenge of the Sith, which is kind of insane. And for all that talk about the director supposedly not understanding the Star Wars source material or not caring about it, there were several species that made their debut in canon from Legends in this show. And I think that that's definitely something that people with that complaint are overlooking. Cortosis is another thing that's not necessarily new to canon from Legends in this show, but it makes its first on-screen appearance in this show, and the concept of it is introduced to a wider audience, and I think that's really cool. I was a big fan of this show's use of real locations, something that I have a problem with in a lot of live-action Star Wars shows, The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Kenobi, is that a lot of them are shot on the volume, and I think that the volume has kind of peaked for now. When it was introduced in The Mandalorian, it was great. It was, used properly, I feel like. And then since then, we've kind of taken it and ran with it. They've used it in Marvel as well. I don't think that the volume at this point is very convincing because all of the backgrounds are very shallow. You can tell that people aren't really interacting with things the way that they should. A lot of what made this show look so great is the use of real locations and real constructed sets. That's partially what made Andor so great in terms of a visual aspect as well, is that they didn't really utilize the volume either. And that's something that I think we need to get back to, because while the volume is good for certain things, and not everything can be faked so well, you kind of have to use the volume sometimes, especially when you've developed the technology. But if you can avoid it, I think that's kind of for the best in a lot of instances. In my opinion, I think the illusion of depth is better with a regular green or blue screen as well. The volume just makes everything shallow and makes it feel like you're in a bubble almost. And that's something that I've been noticing more and more in television and movies lately, and we need to dial it back. I'm tired of thinking we're in a bubble. On top of set design, I think that the costuming was really good. I know that there was some controversial opinions there as well with hair and makeup and costumes, but I think it was all really good, to be honest. I don't really see what the complaints are. I think that the High Republic era Jedi robes in this show look absolutely sick. I really love the yellow mixed with the brown or the yellow mixed with the white. I think both combinations look really good, and I'm just overall very pleased with how they turned out. And the Jedi robes weren't the only cool designs that they had in this show. I really enjoyed some of the ships that were brought into this show. I can't remember if they're from Legends or if they're from the High Republic books, if there's any visual there, but I know that I like the look of them. And I also really love Khmer's helmet, the Cortosis helmet, and the gauntlet too. I think it's just a great combo, great design overall for his character. And I like his lightsaber too. His lightsaber and a few of the others looked really good in my opinion. They're a bit chonky, and I know that there's been some complaints that their lightsabers are a bit chonky, but it doesn't bother me. And I guess to wrap up us talking about designs, I really like the little elephant bird mice things. I forget what they're called, and I forget what two animals they're supposedly based on. But they look, aren't they like anteater mice or anteater or something? I don't know, but I like them. They're weird little, animatronic things, and I think they look cool. In my opinion, the entrance that Khmer made at the end of episode 4, when he just kind of floats down real quietly, I think that's probably the coolest entrance that any character has ever had in Star Wars. And there have been some great ones in Star Wars. You have Maul in The Phantom Menace, Ahsoka's had a few, and now that I think of it, maybe it's not my favorite, but it's definitely top 3. Just the way he floats down is probably the creepiest scene in all of Star Wars, to be honest. All of live action and animated Star Wars, it's probably the creepiest scene. And as much as I would have liked that fight between Khmer and all the Jedi anyway, I think it was a great and ballsy decision to kill off Yord and Jekki as well. You have all those unnamed Jedi who you kind of know going into it are fodder, but you could have left it at that and it would have still been a great fight. But you still decided to kill off 2 pretty significant supporting characters, and not even in like a, whoops, he's dead type of way. Yord got his neck snapped, and Jackie got stabbed 3 times. I think that was an incredible decision, and it really just brings up my level of respect for the creative team behind this show, because one of my big complaints about Disney Star Wars is that sometimes it feels like we're too scared, it feels like we're too nervous, it feels like we're too timid to kill off our characters, because people will be upset, people will be sad, or we're trying to appeal to all ages or whatever. But killing these characters in the way that they did, massive respect. Unfortunately, one of the few spoilers I saw about this show was Jackie's death. And that was kind of disappointing, because that could have been a great moment to see firsthand, not knowing it was coming. But I'll be honest, I didn't see a spoiler about Yord's death. So when he just flipped him around and snapped his neck, I was like, I also credit this show with giving me one of my favorite Jedi, which is insane to say at this point with Star Wars being around forever. I really loved Sol's character. He has grown to be one of my favorite Jedi, and it's really disappointing how his story ended, but I really enjoyed all the moments we got with him being a very caring, a very loving, yet flawed person, and everything just kind of happening in a way that no one really could have foreseen. But his intentions were always there. He was always trying to do the right thing, even if it wasn't the thing that people expected of him or the thing that people would have wanted him to do. He always wanted to do the right thing and tried to. And I guess to preface what I'm about to say with that, Sol was not necessarily in the wrong for what happened, but he wasn't necessarily in the right either. What I will say is this: I blame Mother Coral more than I blame Sol or anyone else. She egged May on to go and be physical and aggressive toward Osha, and that resulted in her starting the fire. And she was the one who was constantly trying to fight the Jedi. When Sol and Torben came for Osha, they weren't necessarily going about things the right way, but she was also itching to fight him. And I will say, I understand why everyone in the group has varying levels of guilt and regret about what happened, because it was a disaster, to be honest. But I will say, I don't fully blame Sol for stabbing Mother Anastasia. And here's where I'm at with this. We're in a standoff right now. Mother Coral wants to fight us, and we're trying to avoid a fight, but we do have a goal and a mission here that we want to get accomplished. We've got archers on the little catwalk up there, aiming bows and arrows at us. You, Mother Anastasia, have already possessed the guy I'm standing next to once, and you're gonna try to disapparate next to me? I mean, and then you get stabbed and say you're gonna let Osha go. You should have led with that. You should have said that. Why didn't you say that first? If someone disapparates next to me, and I'm standing next to a guy who's already been possessed once here, and we're in a standoff and you're also aiming at me, trying to shoot me, if you disapparate next to me, you're getting stabbed. Like, I'm sorry. And as far as everyone else goes, you possessed Kalnaka, and then we forced you out and you died. Why would you do that then? If the consequence for you failing to possess Kalnaka is all of you dying, that's on you, to be honest. Maybe that's just heartless of me, but I think that's on you. I will say though that this show is not a perfect show. I did take a little bit of issue with the finale. I have very mixed feelings about it, and the reason being is that I feel like I always saw Sol's good intentions, and I always saw that he cared about May and Osha, even if he had to choose Osha over May, which is a terrible thing to have to do. And he also did a terrible thing in stabbing Mother Anastasia. It was a very sticky situation, the whole mess, and I definitely see his good intentions. And I definitely don't blame him for things that happened. So the fact that Osha just force chokes Sol to death after learning the truth just doesn't sit right with me. The power aspect of it is fine. I know a lot of people complained about that, but it's fine. Osha and May are both powerful Force users, not super powerful, but they're powerful, and they're on the planet they were created by virgins. It doesn't bother me that she was able to do it physically, but what does bother me is that this is someone who has cared for her and loved her for 16 years and has done a lot for her. Has he made mistakes? Sure, but to just switch up like that is crazy. You're gonna go back to your sister, May, who still started a fire and locked everyone inside. We're not just gonna brush over that and act like she's free of blame just because Sol lied, but apparently we are. So that's kind of something that stood out to me and bothered me. And we're also just gonna brush past the fact that Kamir murdered a lot of people, innocent people, people you were friends with. You knew Yord when you were in the Jedi Order, and you became friends with Jeki. Both of them met tragic ends at the hands of Kamir, and you're just gonna, forgive him for that and go train with them? What's that about? To be honest, for me, I lost all sympathy for Osha in that moment. I know that she's been through a lot. She's had a very tough life. She didn't have any family for 16 years of her life because she thought May was dead. But, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. There's no way you could just, turn, snap, and just kill someone who's loved you, and you love them as well. And what? We're just supposed to act like that's normal? No. No sympathy for me. You're on your own. It's at the point now where I don't know if I want your redemption because of what you did to Soul. If you badly wounded Soul, then I'd want your redemption. But you killed Soul. I kinda, in season 2, just want you to get your comeuppance now. I want to quickly say that I get the logic of having to erase May's memory so the Jedi couldn't use her to find Osha and Kamir, but at the same time, was May going with you not an option? You didn't have her for 16 years in your life, and then you're just willing to let her go? I know you're kind of sacrificing yourself in a way, because one of you's got to go train with Kamir. He's not going to let you both just walk, but could you both not go? You'd be more powerful together. I mean, you 16 years without your sister, and you're just letting her go kind of easily. But that's just me. A big chunk of this first season was about what happened on Brendok and the conspiracy to cover it up. But it feels like there's more conspiracy in this show that could be coming in a season 2. Because it seems like Master Venestra has secrets of her own. It seems like Kamir is her former Padawan. That seems like it's being hinted at. If not, there's some familiarity there. And that's a whole nother side of things that have yet to be explored. What happened there and why. But the way that she informed the Senate about what happened with Soul and the other Jedi feels like not only is she covering for them, but also covering for herself. Whatever she did, or even if it's not something that she explicitly did, but it's just the guilt and shame that she discovered that her former Padawan is on the dark side. But then again, throughout this season, we hear about the Senate and the Republic trying to do investigations into the Jedi and take more power over the Jedi. So it might not even be that selfish of a desire to cover for this situation. It might just be covering for the Jedi, to put them ahead of the situation and not let the Senate know that there are dark warriors out there, because that would certainly make people lose faith in the Jedi. Speaking of the Senate, the one senator that was in the finale that talked to Master Venestra was David Harewood, and I was just happy to see him because I don't see him in much. For those of you that don't know, he was Martian Manhunter in the CW, and I'm just happy to see him again. I miss him. It's nice to know that the Galactic Republic recognizes the Martians. I'm sure I've been talking for a long time. I can feel it in my throat and it's hot out here, so I'm just going to wrap this up. I really enjoyed this show. I know that a lot of people didn't. I don't care. I enjoyed it, and I don't care what anyone else says. I know that a lot of people complained about the writing in the show, saying it was terrible. They're just spouting dribble. The writing was good. I know that it wasn't perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect to be good. Star Wars writing has never been perfect, so let's just get that out of the way. Star Wars has never been perfect in any capacity, but that doesn't stop something from being good. I really enjoyed what we got this season, and I really hope they'd get a season 2. I want to see this story continue, and I want to get more answers to some of the questions that I have. Not to mention, I am enjoying not being in the Skywalker era right now. It's something that a lot of people have been talking about for a long time, that we need to get away from it because we're just doubling down, and forcing stories about Anakin, about Luke. Not every story needs to be about the Skywalkers, and this one isn't in any way, and I've enjoyed that. And just because people have been complaining, Disney, Lucasfilm, we still need more stories that aren't about the Skywalkers. Don't stop now. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you sticking it out this long because I'm sure this video isn't going to be short. If you want to help me out with YouTube, a like, a comment, subscribing to the channel would very much help. Did you like this show? If you did, leave me a comment because I'm sure any comments I get probably won't be positive. So if you did like this show, let me know. Until next time.